"Move it, kid. Important people are coming through." The voice cracked across the marble lobby like a whip, and the boy flinched without looking up. Jaylen Brooks, 11 years old. Black, barefoot, and holding a rag so worn it barely qualified as cloth, dragged it across the glossy floor with the kind of focus most adults never manage. His hands were cracked from chemicals and cold water. His pants were patched at the knees, stitched late at night by his mother, Rosa Brooks, who sewed dignity into every thread because poverty had already taken enough. Behind the glass doors and gold fixtures stood a world that didn't feel like it was built for kids like Jaylen. It was owned by Victor Salazar, a 45-year-old tycoon whose empire in real estate and tech rose as high as his ego. To Victor, people like Jaylen were background noise necessary, but not worth noticing. His executive assistant, Elena Cruz, tried to soften the edges. "He's just doing his job, sir," but Victor only scoffed. "I don't care about his story. Just don't let me see him." What Victor didn't know was that Jaylen wasn't even officially hired. He was there because his father, Darius Brooks, had been injured and could no longer work, and the family couldn't afford school and medicine at the same time. So Jaylen came with his mother before sunrise, not to beg, just to help. Buckets, brooms, quiet labor, quiet pride. And as Victor barked orders like the building belonged to him alone, Jaylen kept wiping the floor, eyes lowered, jaw set, carrying a silence that wasn't weakness. It was patience, the kind that waits for the moment the world finally underestimates the wrong person. "Mama." He's angry again. Jaylen whispered it the moment he saw his mother push the cleaning cart into the lobby, her shoulders already tense, her smile already tired. Rosa Brooks met her son's eyes and nodded softly the way she always did when the world felt heavier than it should. "Don't worry, baby," she murmured. "We just do our work. That's all." Rosa had been cleaning offices for 3 years, long nights, early mornings, hands always smelling faintly of bleach, no matter how much she scrubbed. Since Darius, her husband, lost his ability to work after the accident, she became everything at once: provider, protector, hope. Jaylen came with her because there was no one else. School had slipped into the background when medical bills moved to the front. But Jaylen never complained. He carried buckets bigger than his arms. He organized supplies with quiet precision. He learned how to move through spaces without being seen. And yet inside him lived something Rosa recognized too well: a silent determination that didn't belong to a child. "Why does he talk to us like that?" Jaylen asked one morning, eyes fixed on the polished floor, reflecting the chandeliers above. "We didn't do anything wrong." Rosa paused, her hands resting on the mop handle. "Some people forget," she said gently, "that respect doesn't come from money. But forgetting doesn't give them the right to take it from others." Jaylen nodded, but something flickered behind his eyes. Not anger, not hatred. Focus. That day, the building buzzed differently. A courier arrived at noon with a heavy silver case chained and sealed marked confidential. Elena Cruz signed for it and carried it into Victor Salazar's office herself. Whispers spread fast. Employees leaned closer. Curiosity crackled through the halls. As Victor read the documents inside, his laughter faded. Inside that case, sealed behind layers of security, was an inheritance worth a fortune locked behind puzzles no one in the room yet understood. And while powerful men argued over numbers and pride, a barefoot boy wiped the floor outside the office door, glancing once at the glowing panel inside, and recognizing something that felt strangely familiar. The office door was half open when the frustration finally spilled over. Voices rose, papers slapped against glass. Victor Salazar paced like a caged animal jacket off. Now tie loosened pride unraveling by the minute. 3 executives stood around the desk, men with polished shoes and expensive degrees staring at the glowing panel of the silver case as if it were mocking them. "It doesn't make sense," one of them muttered. "It changes every time another snapped. There has to be a shortcut." There wasn't. Outside, Jaylen moved slowly, mop gliding back and forth, but his ears were sharp. Numbers flashed on the panel through the narrow opening sequences that shifted, rearranged, breathed. His chest tightened with a feeling he hadn't felt in a long time. Recognition. It reminded him of afternoons he barely remembered now. A chalkboard. A kind teacher who stayed late. Puzzles scribbled on scrap paper while other kids ran home. "Numbers don't lie," the teacher used to say. "They talk if you know how to listen." Victor slammed his fist on the desk. "This is humiliating," he barked. "I didn't build an empire to be outsmarted by a metal box." The executives fell silent. Jaylen lowered his eyes when one of them glanced out, gripping his mop tighter than necessary. He wasn't supposed to be listening. He wasn't supposed to be thinking. But his mind was already racing patterns, folding into patterns, primes, whispering to Fibonacci shapes, lining up like old friends. He finished the hallway and moved on heart-pounding thoughts, refusing to let go. Inside the office, Victor scoffed. "All these degrees, all this money, and none of you can solve a simple puzzle. Simple." The word echoed in Jaylen's head as he wiped the baseboard's jaw set, breath steady. Simple didn't mean easy. It meant clean. Honest. Logical. And while powerful men wrestled with their pride behind glass and steel, a barefoot boy in patched pants carried something none of them saw coming. Not anger, not revenge, just quiet certainty. The kind that grows when the world has taught you to wait. The breaking point came wrapped in laughter. Victor Salazar stormed out of his office, and into the open floor, his frustration sharpened into spectacle. Conversations died instantly. Dozens of eyes turned toward him, employees, assistants, executives pretending not to watch. He loved this part. The attention, the control. "Listen up," Victor announced, his voice loud, confident, rehearsed by years of boardrooms. "There's a safe in my office. Inside it, 100 million pesos. A ripple moved through the room. Gasps, whispers, hope rising too fast. "My top people couldn't open it," he continued, smiling now. "So here's the deal. Anyone who can crack it gets 1 million. Cash." Excitement surged. Then Victor's eyes landed on Jaylen. The boy stood near the wall mop in hand, trying to make himself smaller than he already was. And something ugly flickered across Victor's face, an idea born of arrogance. "Actually," he said, raising his voice even higher, "let's make it interesting." He pointed directly at the child. "If this kid can open it," laughter erupted before he could finish. "I'll give him all of it. The full 100 million. The room exploded. Phones came out. Snickers turned into outright laughter. Someone whispered, "This I've got to see." Another said, "That's cruel." But no one stopped it. Rosa froze across the room, her heart slamming against her ribs. Shame burned her cheeks. She took a step forward, then stopped when she saw Jaylen turn toward her. He didn't look scared. He looked calm. Sir Jaylen said, his voice clear, steady, slicing through the noise. "Are you serious?" Victor smirked. "Dead serious, kid. If you open that safe, it's yours. If not," he shrugged, "you go back to cleaning floors." "Deal?" The room went silent. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. This wasn't a challenge. It was a trap. A public humiliation dressed up as generosity. Jaylen glanced at his mother. She gave the smallest nod, not permission, but trust. "I accept," he said. And in that moment, laughter turned into something else. Because for the first time, the world had underestimated the wrong person out loud. The laughter followed him down the hall. It clung to Jaylen's back as he walked toward Victor Salazar's office, mop left behind, hands empty, but steady. Phones were raised like weapons, recording what everyone was sure would become a viral joke. A barefoot black kid, patched pants, walking into a room where powerful men had already failed. The humiliation was supposed to be quick. Jaylen felt his heart racing, but not from fear, from focus. Inside the office, the air was thick. The silver safe sat on the desk like a challenge carved in steel, its electronic panel glowing with shifting numbers and symbols. Victor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Take your time," he said mockingly. "Magic doesn't rush, right?" Jaylen didn't answer. He stepped closer. The room quieted, not out of respect, but curiosity. He leaned in, eyes scanning the panel. Numbers flowed in sequences that felt almost familiar. His brow furrowed slightly, then relaxed. Prime numbers. He remembered them from a lifetime ago, from a classroom he never got to return to. 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. They weren't random. They were speaking. A voice echoed in his memory, his old teacher's voice. "Numbers don't care where you come from. They only care if you're honest with them." Jaylen reached out his finger, hovering for just a second before pressing the first input. The panel shifted. Laughter bubbled again. "He's just guessing. This is painful." But Jaylen didn't hear them. The sequence changed, another layer revealed. Fibonacci this time. He swallowed, then smiled faintly. He was home. His fingers moved deliberately now, not rushed, not hesitant. Each press had intention. Each pause had thought. Victor's smile faltered. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. The executives exchanged glances. The sounds coming from the safe weren't error beeps anymore. They were confirmations. Soft, precise. Jaylen exhaled slowly, blocking out the room, the cameras, the doubt. For the first time that day, he wasn't invisible. He was exactly where he was meant to be, letting his mind speak in a language the world had ignored for far too long. The room held its breath. Jaylen's finger hovered over the panel as the final layer revealed itself, not numbers this time, but a question glowing softly against the steel. A logic riddle. Simple on the surface, deceptive beneath it. The kind designed to trap people who rush, who assume, who want to prove they're smart, instead of actually listening. Victor scoffed nervously. "That's enough," he muttered. "You've had your fun." Jaylen didn't look back. He read the words again slowly. "A father has 3 sons. The first is named Monday. The second is named Tuesday. What is the third son's name?" Whispers rippled through the room. "Wednesday. Obviously Wednesday." Someone laughed, relieved, ready for this to end. Jaylen smiled just barely. He remembered another voice. His teacher's. The answer is always in the question. Don't chase patterns blindly. Think. "The third son's name is John," Jaylen said quietly, typing it in. Click. A soft mechanical sound echoed through the office. Then another. Lights on the panel shifted from red to yellow to green. The safe unlocked. Silence slammed into the room like a wall. Victor shot to his feet, chair skidding backward. No, that's impossible." Jaylen stepped back, hands at his sides, heart pounding now, not with fear, but with disbelief. He hadn't touched the door. He didn't need to. Victor staggered forward and pulled the handle. The safe opened. Inside, neatly stacked, undeniable, were the bearer bonds. 100 million pesos. Real. Heavy. Final. Phones slipped from hands and hit the floor. Someone whispered, "He did it." Another voice cracked. The kid actually did it. Rosa pushed through the crowd, tears streaming, and dropped to her knees beside her son, pulling him into her arms like the world might try to take him back. Victor stood frozen, color draining from his face. The joke was gone. The laughter was gone. The power had shifted. Jaylen looked up at this man who had mocked him, humiliated him, dismissed him, and spoke with a calm that cut deeper than anger ever could. "It's open, sir," he said. "You can check." And in that moment, everyone understood. This wasn't luck. This was truth finally being seen. No one spoke at first. The open safe sat between them like a mirror, reflecting not money, but truth. Victor Salazar stared into it, as if it might close again if he waited long enough. His mouth opened, then shut. His hands trembled. That's not possible," he finally said, his voice thin. "Someone helped him. The words fell hard and ugly. A murmur moved through the room, not laughter this time, but discomfort. Doubt didn't land where Victor aimed it. Too many people had watched. Too many cameras had recorded every second. Elena Cruz stepped forward, her voice steady. No one spoke to him. We were all here. Victor spun on her. Then it was luck. Pure luck. Luck, someone whispered. 3 layers. Jaylen stood quietly beside his mother, her arms wrapped around him, as if the world might try to pull him away. He didn't look proud. He didn't look angry. He looked sad. Not for himself, but for a grown man shrinking in front of everyone. I didn't guess, Jaylen said softly. I just listened. That did it. Victor's face flushed. His authority so carefully built cracked in public. He had made the bet as a joke. A spectacle. Now it had teeth. Now it had witnesses. Across the room, phones buzzed non-stop. Messages, notifications. The story was already escaping the building. Rosa lifted her son's face and kissed his forehead, tears slipping freely. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. No matter what happens next. Victor heard that. For the first time, he looked at Jaylen not as a joke, not as a prop, but as a boy who had just beaten him fair and square. And in that look was something new. Not respect yet. Fear. Because Victor Salazar understood something deep in his gut. He had made a promise in front of the wrong audience. And now the world was watching to see what kind of man he really was. The backlash arrived before the room could empty. Phones vibrated in pockets. Notifications stacked faster than anyone could read them. Someone whispered, "It's already online." Another said, "This is blowing up." The moment had slipped beyond Victor Salazar's control, and he felt it in his bones. Then the elevator chimed. High heels cut across the marble floor with sharp, familiar authority. Valeria Stone stepped out, immaculate, composed the woman who once shared Victor's name and his empire. She took in the scene in seconds. The open safe, the stunned employees, the cameras, the black boy standing quietly beside his mother. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice low but lethal. Victor didn't answer. Valeria's eyes narrowed as she pieced it together. "You made a joke out of a child," she said slowly, disbelief giving way to anger. "In public. He challenged me." Victor snapped, desperate now. "I was proving a point." "No," Valeria said coldly. "You were proving who you are." She turned to Jaylen and Rosa, her expression softening just enough to hurt more. "I'm sorry," she said. "What you experienced here was wrong." Victor bristled. "This has nothing to do with you." "It has everything to do with me," she shot back. "Your name is tied to companies, boards, investors, my investors. And this." She gestured to the room. "This is a disaster." The murmurs grew louder. Employees exchanged looks. Some shook their heads. Others stared at Victor like they were seeing him for the first time. Valeria lowered her voice. "You promised him the money. There are witnesses. Videos. If you don't honor it, this won't just be a scandal, it'll be a stain." Jaylen watched quietly, absorbing every word. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't celebrating. He was learning. Rosa held her son's hand tighter. Victor felt the walls closing in, not from anger, but from consequence. For years he had believed power protected him. Today it exposed him. And as Valeria walked away, leaving silence in her wake, Victor Salazar finally understood. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about whether he would leave this room a rich man or a small one. The choice came quietly, but it cut deeper than any shout ever could. Victor Salazar stood alone at the edge of the room, while the noise swirled around him. Employees whispering, phones buzzing, reputations shifting in real time. The money sat untouched in the open safe, yet it felt heavier than it ever had. For the first time in his life, Victor understood that wealth could corner you just as tightly as poverty. Across the room, Rosa pulled Jaylen close, instinctively shielding him. Years of survival had taught her that moments like this rarely ended kindly for people like them. She was already preparing herself for disappointment, for excuses dressed up as authority. Victor saw it. That look, and something in him cracked. "Enough," he said suddenly. The room fell still. He walked forward slowly, deliberately, until he stood in front of Jaylen. Not above him, not towering, but facing him. Cameras lifted higher, breath caught breath. "I made a promise," Victor said, his voice steadier than he felt, "a public one." He turned to the room. "And whether I like how it happened or not, he earned it." A wave moved through the crowd, not cheers, not applause, but something closer to relief. Rosa's grip tightened. "Jaylen," she whispered, barely breathing. Victor looked at her next. Really looked, not as labor, not as background, as a mother who had held a family together with nothing but grit. "No one planned this," he said quietly. "Not him, not you. I did this." He paused. "And I won't hide from it." Jaylen met his eyes. Calm. Unafraid. Not triumphant. "I didn't do it to embarrass you," Jaylen said. "I just answered the question." Victor swallowed hard. That was the moment he knew this wasn't about losing money. It was about standing up for the truth when it cost you. And as the room watched, Victor Salazar chose for the first time in a very long while to defend the right thing, even if it meant letting the world see him humbled. The consequences didn't wait for morning. By nightfall, the videos had escaped the building and spread like wildfire. Clips of Victor's laughter, his pointing finger, Jaylen standing small and steady beside the open safe. Millions of strangers watched the same moment and reached the same conclusion. This wasn't entertainment. It was cruelty exposed. Rosa felt it first. Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Messages from other cleaning companies. Short, polite, final. "We're going to pause your contract. This situation brings unwanted attention. We wish you the best." By sunrise, she had no work. She sat at the small kitchen table staring at her hands that had scrubbed floors for years, wondering how doing the right thing could feel so dangerous. Jaylen watched quietly from the doorway, guilt flickering across his face. "Mom." "I'm sorry," he said softly. Rosa stood and crossed the room in 2 steps, pulling him into her arms. "No," she said firmly. "Never apologize for using your mind. Never apologize for telling the truth." Across the city, Victor Salazar hadn't slept. His penthouse felt smaller than ever. Lawyers called. Partners hesitated. One board member resigned. Another demanded answers. For the first time, the cost of arrogance had a number, and it was climbing fast. But worse than the money was the mirror. Every replay showed him the same thing. A boy who didn't beg, didn't boast, didn't flinch. A boy who answered honestly and stood still while the world decided what to do with him. Victor closed his eyes. He thought of his own mother cleaning offices at night so he could study during the day. He had promised himself he would never become the kind of man who looked down on people like her. And yet he had. By noon, Victor made the call. Not to a lawyer, not to PR. To Rosa. "I don't know how to fix what I broke," he said quietly when she answered. "But I intend to start by doing exactly what I promised." On the other end of the line, Rosa said nothing. Neither of them knew yet that this was only the beginning of justice, of reckoning, and of a lesson far more expensive than money. Victor didn't make it a spectacle this time. There were no cameras, no speeches. Just a quiet room, a legal desk, and a man who finally understood the weight of his own name. The documents were signed carefully. The promise made in arrogance was fulfilled in humility. 100 million pesos. No conditions, no tricks. Rosa's hands trembled as she held the papers, not from greed but from disbelief. Jaylen stood beside her, calm as ever, eyes steady, absorbing everything without letting it change who he was. Victor looked at the boy and felt something unfamiliar tighten his throat. "This doesn't erase what I did," Victor said quietly. "But I hope it proves that I'm trying to be better." Jaylen nodded once. "Keeping your word matters," he replied. "That's how people know who you really are." Those words landed harder than any headline. In the days that followed, the world kept watching, but the noise began to shift. Anger turned into reflection. Mockery turned into respect. And Victor Salazar, a man who had built everything except his conscience, began rebuilding from the inside out. Jaylen returned home that night to a small apartment that suddenly felt lighter. Not because of money, but because dignity had won. He hadn't changed to fit the world. The world had been forced to see him. Never confuse power with worth. Never confuse silence with weakness. And never underestimate someone just because the world taught them to stand quietly. If this story moved you, it's probably because it touched something real. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated? And how did it shape you? If this story mattered to you, like this video. Subscribe for more stories about truth, dignity, and the quiet strength that changes lives. Because sometimes the strongest voice in the room is the one that never needed to shout.